All right, perfect. So folks can hear me. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of folks' time. We have a lot of information to get through in a relatively short amount of time. So a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this, hopefully, if I did everything correctly. I also want to say thank you for you all attending our first webinar. So hopefully everything goes well and as smooth as possible. Also, my coworker Molly is here. You will not hear her, but she's going to be kind of helping me monitor the chat. If folks have questions about audio, the webinar, do that in the chat. If you all have questions pertaining to the PowerPoint, things we're covering, there's also what's called a Q&A. You should be able to see that button. Go ahead and click that, and then we'll answer those questions as we go along. How this is going to kind of go, we're going to go pretty quickly through a 101, I'll say. We'll call it like a 0.5 about domestic violence, and then we're going to really spend a lot of time talking about specifically safety planning around COVID right now and everybody social distancing. So let's get started. First off, we're Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center, right? We work with folks who've experienced domestic violence and child abuse at any point in their lifetime. With that being said, I know some of you have attended trainings with me in the past. We're still going to be talking about domestic violence, and sometimes that can be triggering. So please take care of yourselves. If something comes up, you know, we do a lot of help, and right now is no different. So before we get started, I just want us all take a breath. Right? This is not just because of the issue and what we're talking about right now, but because we're all kind of experiencing hard times. So you're going to get a couple reminders of these to just take time for you. Okay? And so what is domestic violence, right? Well, we all know the legal definition, right, is knowingly causing harm. And this is important just for when we're making those referrals, right? When we're calling police or when we're potentially looking at legal interventions, which we will talk about, we really want to be sure that we're making those correct interventions and those correct referrals. For the sake of us, right, and what we're talking about right now, we're really talking about power and control. What is one partner doing to make the other partner go where they want them to go, talk to or not talk to certain individuals, right? And so we're going to keep coming back to that. I think it's also important for us to recognize when we're working with folks in the community and having these conversations now, right? The relationships exist on a spectrum, right? I want all of us and every single person you work with to have everything on that healthy side, right? Respect, trust, communication, and have none of that manipulation and blame shifting. The hard part is when we get into that middle ground of what works for me in my relationships may not work for you all, or what works for us may not work with folks that we're working with. And so we really have to be mindful of that gray area of those unhealthy stuff. And so types of abuse, we're going to break these down, but really when we're talking about types of abuse, this is what we're going to be talking about. So verbal and emotional abuse, right? Anything an abusive person does or says to control your behaviors, your feelings, right? What that's going to look like now specifically when we can't leave our homes is it could look like providing misinformation to their partner, right? Giving false information about the stay-at-home order, about the extension of the stay-at-home order, because if an abusive partner can control what their person is hearing or not hearing, that can help them contain some of that, right? That can help them maintain that power. It might also look like not allowing access to certain services, spiritual services, therapeutic services, right? It could be threats to harm in a different way. I'm going to kick you out and you're going to be exposed, or I'll expose you and the kids, right? It's increased constant monitoring, right? Threats to harm themselves. Well, you don't care if I got sick, or you don't care what would happen to me. And so it's using that same verbal and emotional, but in a different way now, right? Physical abuse, right? This one is going to look a lot similar like it normally does, but now there's that added layer of you are physically not able to leave, right? We're all being told not to leave our homes. And so if I'm living with an abusive partner, that takes away some of my ability to leave, to go to work, to do some things that normally allow me to escape when I might have been able to. Sexual abuse, right? Again, not ignoring, or excuse me, ignoring boundaries. We're not able to leave. Or maybe if I'm someone who lives in a one bedroom, a smaller apartment, I now don't have as much space to leave. And so it's easier for my partner to ignore my boundaries, ignore my feelings. Maybe my partner isn't allowing me to leave to go get my birth control or other medications that I need to stay safe. Financial abuse. Again, this is one that we're really going to see ramped up. Abusive partners or households are impacted by unemployment, someone being laid off, access to stimulus money, withholding supplies. Maybe this looks like withholding cleaning supplies. This could look like withholding necessary items, canceling insurance, threatening to cancel insurance. Refusing to give money for necessities. Maybe now I do need to go to the grocery store. I do need to access whatever it is, and my partner's not going to give me that money until they get from me what they want from me, or until maybe I cooperate with what it is that they're saying. And again, digital abuse, right? We're all staying connected, hopefully with our folks, right? We're still able to, while being physically away from them, staying emotionally or socially connected to folks. But an abusive partner is going to amp up that stalking or tracking on social media, right? Monitoring who their friends or their partner is. I might not be able to make those phone calls that I used to make because my partner's now home. Not allowing a partner to participate in a happy hour with friends or a social service, a church service, a support group, again, with those people that I care about. Allowing, again, that technology that can be so helpful, more access to monitoring. And so again, we all know a little bit, or probably have heard about that power and control, that cycle of violence, right? So an abusive partner could potentially use this time to feel more justified in escalating, right? They're not going to take that accountability for their actions, for what they're doing. They're going to blame it on those outside sources, and not having that breakup of leaving the home, of having that separation, can amplify that tension building in that explosion phase. I think it's also good to point out, right? Not all abusive people who make the choice to abuse, right? It's not something that they're doing. They're making a choice to abuse their partner. They're making a choice to abuse these people that they're supposed to care about. But we're seeing an amplification of the manipulation, the control, maybe that emotional dependency, right? Well, I can't go to work. I can't go to church. Shouldn't go to the grocery store. So now I'm going to lean on my partner for everything. I'm going to push away or aside their feelings, and I'm going to use them to get my needs met. Blame, right? Blaming everyone else for what's going on. And then again, those high power and control needs. We also need to keep in mind that when we're seeing more violence, or we're seeing escalated violence, which I think is sort of the trend nationwide as the violence is escalating, is that perpetrators or abusers are masters at manipulating, right? They believe that their violence is reasonable, justified, and rational. And so now that was, like I said, that was a really, really quick. We're going to start looking really at specifics of what does COVID-19 mean for folks that are impacted, right? So again, increased isolation. Isolation is already a common tactic used by abusers. And now again, not being able to see coworkers, not being able to maybe go to doctor's appointments, not being able to go to the neighbor's house, a friend's house, is increasing that isolation for victims to potentially feel more alone and to feel more trapped in their situations. Increased control, right? Being able to limit that control, being able to not leave, is greatly limiting the options for accessing help, right? If I can't go somewhere, or if my partner doesn't leave the home and I can't call someone, my options for assessing services, for assessing needs, or for assessing what I need has greatly decreased. Fear. I think fear right now, we're all a little scared, right? The fear of what's happening next, right? We are all living in a time right now that's unknown. And so now that normal societal fear, the fear we all feel as a community, is being amplified. Right now, we're kind of looking at, I can't escape, right? Limited options to escape. And if I'm injured, if my partner severely injures me, I have the fear of, do I go to the hospital? Is the hospital going to be a safe place, or is the hospital now going to be someplace that I'm potentially going to get sick? Will I be a priority? Uncertainty about the future. One of the biggest barriers for safety for survivors is self-sufficiency and financial security, right? So if I can't work, if I'm laid off, if I'm furloughed, if I'm unsure about what my job is, my thought process isn't necessarily going to be leaving. Maybe it was before, but now it's just going to be survival, right? We have to especially take into consideration most vulnerable populations in our community, right? People who already have limited access to healthcare, who already maybe don't have stable housing or financial security. Daycares right now, right? I don't have access to daycare, childcare for my folks. And so again, that uncertainty tied in with that fear is only amplifying what a victim may be feeling at this moment. Limited access to resources. Maybe in the future, or in the past, excuse me, I might have been able to stay with family and friends. No longer, right? I'm not able to go somewhere. I'm not able to go to a friend's house. Children in abusive homes no longer have that safety net of school. They no longer have that safety net of being able to talk to a teacher, being able to escape maybe abuse that they're experiencing or abuse that they're witnessing. And so that's going to amplify that feeling in the home. Additionally, when limited access to resources, we know that right now courts are limiting what they're doing. And so maybe my option was a civil protection order. It's still an option, and we'll talk about that. But it's going to be a longer process, right? If my partner is arrested, then it's going to take longer for this system to be resolved, or this issue to be resolved. We also have to look at, for victims kind of in that situation, and acknowledge that in this time, we know gun sales have gone up. We know that the presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the likelihood that a woman will be killed by 5 times. So if I'm someone living in a home where my partner now has purchased a gun or purchased a new gun, that increases my danger. Calling the police, right? We know that a lot of times victims, survivors are reluctant to call the police normally for a multitude of reasons. But now, are the police going to respond? Are police arresting for misdemeanor offenses? These are all things that victims are having to think about when they make those calls, or think about, am I going to access help? And so this is a lot of information, so I want to pause. I said, again, we're going to go super brief. So does anyone have any questions? How are we feeling? Are things good? All right. We're good? Cool. We'll keep going then. So what can you do? How can we help? Right? Let's really look at these. So first things first, one thing, right, we all can do, stay in touch, right? Keep it generic. We know that communicating digitally leaves a trail. So if we're sending a text message, if we're calling on FaceTime, or, however folks are getting really creative, keep it general. Hey, I'm just calling everybody, we're all kind of stuck in our homes together. So I figured, what about our time to call, right? reaching out to those folks and providing them with correct information. If you are concerned that someone maybe is living with an abuser that might be providing false information, say, hey, did you hear or see DeWine's press conference yesterday? How are you feeling about the new stay-at-home order? How are you feeling about how this person or what this new Amy Acton policy said? So again, asking questions, information. Listen, right? Listen to what this person is telling you. Support them and be judgmental. Be that safe space that they might not be getting at home. It's also important that we keep this information confidential. If if a friend is telling me something, I'm not now going to go on my next happy hour call and say, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Help if you can. Is there anything I can do, right? Asking those direct questions. How can I help? Is there anything I can do? And looking beyond to just safety, looking at accessing or providing resources for free lunch, right? For food banks, providing resources for utility assistance. Coming up with a code if you can. When you say, is there anything I can do? It's also important that we are super transparent about what we can or we cannot do. Don't say, hey, if you need anything, I can come over with a moving truck if you can't come over with a moving truck, right? It's also important that we're not trying to fix everything. It is not necessarily our job or our role to make everything else okay. I think everyone on this call, I'm assuming, is a helper in some way, shape, or form, right? We want to help. We want to make things okay. We want to make things better. It's not always our job. Sometimes just listening and providing that resource is the best. It's also really, really important that we remember and keep in mind that survivors are already extremely savvy and resilient. They are the experts on their lives. They're the person that knows their life and this abusive person best. They're going to know the best course of action to take. Understanding the dynamics of domestic violence, right? What we're doing now. Keeping in mind that abusers often blame abuse on other people or external factors, right? This could look like, I'm really stressed out with COVID and the stay-at-home order. That's why this abuse is increasing. I'm really stressed out with what's going on with my job, with what's happening with unemployment. And so I'm going to use that as an excuse to harm my partner further or to harm my family further. I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone, to some extent, are stressed, right? And so to answer a question that just came up, are domestic violence shelters open? Yes, we are open. We'll talk about our services a little bit later, but our services, our helpline is available, our shelter is available. We want folks to know that we're here. Our advocates are still working from home. We're making it work, but we are here for folks that might need that. Home is not safe at this right moment. So that was a perfect segue. Thank you, Tanya. I hope I said that correctly. Refer to DVCAC. If you're unsure about how to safety plan, you can do a little bit of this piece, right? You can do that. Hey, I've heard that. Hey, how are you? Hey, have you thought about calling, right? Call, text, live chat. We're here for folks. Donate, right? We've seen a significant increase in needing stuff and supplies from our Amazon wish list. So we're still working with folks, getting folks cleaning supplies, what's toilet paper, whatever it is, we're getting that to our clients as needed. So those are just little things, again, to acknowledge that you all don't have to know everything, but knowing that we are here is super great. So I'm so glad. Things to respond to, right? Instead of saying, what did you do when our friends disclose, saying, tell me how you responded. Saying things rather than, did you do something to try and stop the abuse? Say, you deserve to feel safe. Rather than saying, can't you just forget it? Which I don't think is something I would hope none of us would say in this time. But say there are people that can help you. There are shelters that are still open, right? There are helplines that are still working. Also saying, I'm really sorry that this happened to you. I think especially right now, it's so important to validate folks' feelings and acknowledging that it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel afraid. It's okay to feel like you don't know how to feel. you're not going crazy, right? It's a weird time, and whatever it is, whether it's a mix of emotions, anxiety, sadness, fear, annoyance, you're okay. And so safety planning, right? This is really what we want to spend the most of our time talking about, is that safety planning. So a safety plan really is an individualized risk or individualized plan to reduce risk, right? We want to really, especially now, look at that maintaining basic human needs, right? For victims and for kids, how to manage and cope with emotions and how to talk with those support systems. It's also important, and especially now, that this is going to change and ebb and flow. I think that we are all in this point of what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week. And so knowing that our safety plan is going to maybe look a little bit different today than it does next week, right? Knowing that our safety plan is going to look a little different maybe after the stay-at-home orders. I'm feeling like there's probably going to be that in-between phase of a stay-at-home being lifted, but still maybe staying home. And then when this is all over, still wanting that safety plan to fit for a victim and fit for their needs. Knowing and acknowledging that a victim cannot control the actions of an abuser is important. I wish that there was a better way, right? We're always kind of putting that onus on the victims to say, you have to do this, you have to do that, but really that's kind of how this works, is we're planning with that victim, with their children, with their family, of what to do if a victim were to do something or were to say something, right? So general safety planning, right? This is important that we acknowledge that as of right now, safety planning has changed. How we safety plan a month ago, 2 months ago is changing. We might not be planning for getting a victim away. We're just kind of right now planning for how to survive, right? How do we get through this right now in this moment? So some of those general safety tips, and then we'll really start to get a little bit more detailed. Talk with family or friends, right? Coming up with that joint plan, while also limiting information at the victim's comfort level, right? We don't decide what information that victim wants to put out or not put out. We want them to decide that. If we can safely document the abuse, what happened, when did it happen, who was involved, right? This could look as simple as a journal, right? Journaling this down somewhere safe. If you can take pictures of the victim, of the home, of what happened, that's also really great. Some other things are kind of maybe backing a car into the driveway. Can the victim sleep in their car? They might not be able to stay with a friend or a family member, but can they stay in their car? Not ideal, but it might help separate them from that violent situation in that moment. This is one I found from an online organization that I think is so helpful. If the abuser is home, can that victim use the phone while they're in the bathroom? Finding those moments longer than a few minutes to separate, text a helpline, call a helpline while the victim's in the bathroom, while an abuser's in the bathroom, maybe while an abuser is showering, right? A lot of times the bathroom is a safe space, right? My bathroom is my bathroom time. No one else is joining. And so that might be that time that someone can use that phone in a safe manner. I think it's important for us to keep in mind additional barriers and considerations at this time. We know that for a while, legal status has been an issue. Right now, again, we're seeing that issue be amplified. Someone who's undocumented might not be able to access or isn't able to access those same government programs, unemployment, food stamps. If they don't have an ID, they may not be able to access certain food banks, certain food distributions. And so looking at, coming back to what can I do to help, maybe you're someone that can go to that distribution for them to pick up the food and then drop it off on the front steps. If someone doesn't have access to a car, that might limit their ability to, again, get certain food donations, drop-offs. A lot of things and a lot of resources are going to drive through for safety reasons. But if I don't have a car, how am I going to be able to access that drive-through food bank? I think it's also important for us to consider mental health, right? I think we're all a little more anxious right now. I think a lot of folks are, again, unsure. And so someone with already existing or pre-existing anxiety, depression, may be experiencing those increased symptoms, right? Additional stress. Maybe I'm not able to go to my therapy sessions as regularly as I can. It's a little different going to therapy in person, sitting one-on-one in a room with someone versus seeing someone on a phone, or how we're doing this webinar right now, right? I'll admit, I'm going to say it's a little different not being able to see all your faces. And so knowing how to interact in those situations. If I am someone with a pre-existing health condition and I'm supposed to be staying at home, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to go to the pharmacy and to access my medication. It might be a little bit more difficult for me to go out and access things that I need to, that I would normally be able. We also really need to consider legal protections, right? Disruption in criminal charges are happening. Civil protection orders are still happening, but how they're happening is much more limited. And so the process has changed, right? So looking at police responses, if an abuser is on probation, parole is being monitored, I think it's really, really important that safety planning is being a part of this. Monitoring may be disrupted, and so they might not be getting that same supervision that they were getting prior to the stay-at-home orders. Police response, we still want folks to call the police in an emergency situation, but we also need to be sure that we're talking to victims about if the police are called and there's maybe a slower response time, or if they respond and the jurisdiction is not arresting for misdemeanors, how is that victim and how is that abuser going to respond to the police coming out and maybe not being arrested, or something along those lines not happening? We really need to process with our folks that we're working with and let them know that the court process is slowed down and it may be extended. What that extension looks like right now, we don't know. I will encourage you all, our advocates are still doing amazing work. They're still working. If you have someone I'm going to shout a couple folks out that I know are here. If you're working with someone in Euclid, call Vicki to see what that process is doing right now. If you're working with someone in South Euclid, make sure they're connected to Deborah so that she can really answer those questions of what that court process looks like. Because right now, court processes and police response are going to look different city to city, and they may even look different day to day. And so that's an important thing in conversation to have with folks. So if we're wanting to safety plan with an abuser, I think that it's important that we talk with folks about the realities, right? If you're sensing a violent incident, where can we go in the house? Keeping that same, staying away from kitchens, staying away from bathrooms, but knowing where those weapons are located. If it's someone and they are buying a gun, they're purchasing things, knowing where that gun is in the house. We always say, right, stay out of the kitchen because that's where the knives are. If it's possible and that victim is starting to sense that violence, can they go out on the front steps, right? Can they go out? Are they someone with a yard? Are they someone with a porch? If it's someone maybe living in an apartment building, is there a neighbor that they can work out the code with and knock on their door? I've worked with folks in the past who, I think it was the victim lived upstairs and their neighbor lived downstairs, and they had worked out a code that if the victim needed help, they would pound on the floor a certain number of times, right? Depending on the age of the kid, making sure that we're removing those kids from that violent situation. If it's, 4 or 5-year-old, it seems, make it a game. Hey, we're gonna play this. I need you all to go hide in your rooms, or I need you all to go play out in the backyard. Trying to separate little ones as possible. Again, using a code word, identifying a safe location, developing important, and a go bag, right? We hear all of the time about go bags. And so right now they're the same with some added necessities, right? Important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, money as you can. Right now it's hard because folks are being encouraged not to pay with cash, right? That might be the only option for folks. So make sure that we're keeping that money. Daily essential items, right? This normally might look like pocket shampoo, pocket conditioner, but can we add hand sanitizer to that, right? Can we add tissues to that? Can we add other cleaning products to that go bag? So if they needed to go to a hotel, if they needed to go to a friend's or family member's house, they're still keeping folks safe, and we're still letting them know. Where can you go? Coming back to that separation in that bathroom, can you go for a walk around the block, right? Can you go for a walk, not to a playground, but maybe to a park? Can you go somewhere just to kind of try to stop that violent incident from escalating, right? And so now let's look more specifically at safety planning with kids, right? That code word, who to call, where to go. Maybe right now, oh, Sheila, that's great. So Sheila says, instead of money, suggesting Cash App, right? So looking at specific ideas, Cash App, Venmo, thank you. I'm stealing that and I'm adding that. I'm sure that's not the first thing I've stolen from you, so thank you for that. Sending money that way, right? I'm someone, I'll admit, it's been an adjustment. I get my cash out every week, and that's my fun money, and I don't have that anymore, and so that's been an adjustment. And so we have to really look at coming up with that creative Cash App or other things. Maybe I can't leave my home, but my children can, right? Maybe I'm not someone, I don't want to, put myself at risk, or if I'm someone with an autoimmune disease, I can't leave, but getting the children someplace safe. Talking with children, and especially older children and especially older boys, about not intervening. And I say that because statistics show that a majority of young men who are incarcerated for harming someone who's trying to harm their mom. That's a reality. And so it's really, really important to have that conversation about why it's important not to intervene. It's also really important to have conversations about violence in relationships. You've all probably seen multiple articles and news stories about domestic violence increasing, right? So now's the time to keep it general and say, hey, have you seen this news article? How do you feel about this? April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. And so talking with kids about what they feel like a healthy relationship is or is not, right? Talking with them or using some prompts. I'll plug our social media. We have stuff on there about child abuse. We posted something a couple days ago about parenting and children. And so using those tools that are already created, those handouts that are already there, to facilitate that conversation. Kids growing up in domestic violence homes are confused, right? And so maybe they see mom and dad say, I love you, but then they see mom and dad fight. And so that's a confusing time, and it's important to, yeah, absolutely. Gabriella, I agree. And so we're seeing, undocumented folks have an increased barrier in general, and have a harder time accessing services or resources. And now it's even more amplified, right? And I kind of have been in my brain thinking about that it's this domestic violence normally, and everyone's now up on the scale of being able to access resources, being scared, not knowing what to do, right? So looking at cell phone safety tips, right? I think a lot of us are communicating more on the phone, more through technology, more through devices, although I certainly have been learning all of the ways you can FaceTime folks that I did not know of before, right? So maybe it looks like putting a password on your phone, if it's safe. If an abuser is gonna say, why did you all of a sudden put a password or a passcode on your phone? Don't do it. Consider turning Bluetooth off. Bluetooth, if it's on a lot of times, will automatically connect to devices. And so making sure that it's off so that that information doesn't automatically store to something that it's not connected to. Being mindful of information that's stored on our phones, whether it be apps, whether it be games, whether it be, oh gosh, I'm going to sound old right now, whatever that is, being mindful and knowing exactly what that product does. Being mindful about data information that is stored in the iCloud, right? We all get, I think those, on my Apple phone, I always get the updates of, they're going to do an automatic update. So whether I want to or not, right, my information is automatically stored in the cloud. Looking and being sure, is there a way to turn that off so that if I have a shared computer with my abuser or someone who's abusive, that information is not automatically stored there, right? Being mindful also about Google accounts, right? So I'm someone that it's a lot easier to just use my Google account to just log into things, but that's not very safe, right? So making sure that we're not just using that. Reviewing privacy settings on our phones, on our applications, oh my gosh, apps. Considering what apps have our location and our location settings turned on or off, right? So maybe that looks like turning off those location settings and only using them as needed, right? Creating a username rather than your own name when possible. If I'm signing up for a new account, I'm not saying Megan Gergen, but instead I'm saying MG, right? Or Meg, or just Megan. Megan's a popular name. So that way it's harder to connect those accounts. Using a virtual phone number. So if I'm calling someone or if I'm accessing help, sometimes Google has that application that you can use a fake number to call out through other folks. Making sure that we're limiting information that we're putting online. Being mindful of our status updates, our pictures, but also being mindful of what our family and friends are putting up. Again, location settings and privacy settings. We all have a lot of time on our hands, I think, some of us more than others. So go and Google yourself and look at what information comes up, what is public, what is private, what can other people see. That's really good, and honestly sometimes surprising that you don't realize all of the information that folks have on. Blocking safe people or unsafe people. Only keeping apps on our phones that we use. I think it's also important to log out of apps. So for example, Facebook, Twitter, though Instagram, right? It's a pain. It's not always super easy, but if we can log in and out of those apps every time, it's going to be harder for someone to log in if my phone's just sitting on the couch. Remembering that any app we download is going to stay on our download list. So if I'm downloading a safety app such as Aspire or Circle of Six or something else, it's going to show up on my download list. So I might be able to hide it in a folder, but there still is that possibility that my abuser might have access to it if they have access to my account. It also might show up if I have to pay for an app, or if I want, the more enhanced version of that, it's going to show up on my bank statement or my credit card. If I have my phone and maybe an iPad as well, making sure that they're not connected. If I have my phone and it downloads that safety app because my abuser doesn't have access to it, making sure that that app is also not going to automatically show up on my iPad. Because I might think it's safe on my phone, but the moment my abuser starts using our shared iPad, they're going to see that application and wondering what's going on. So it's convenient to sync devices, but making sure that for safety reasons, they're not synced and they're not connected if someone's doing something like a safety app. Avoid clicking on links or opening attachments, right? I think that's kind of a general safety tip for all of us. But if I'm uncertain of an email and I get it and I click it, it could potentially be my abuser sending spyware or some sort of tracking device that I'm not aware of, right? Along those veins, if it's on my computer, if it's on my iPad or other device, tablet, running that antivirus and anti-software update so that it's continuously monitoring what's being on or off. Being mindful of camera access, right? You all are seeing me through my camera, and so I have a flippy, the official name for it is a flippy on my camera, but making sure that's off when I'm not trying to show someone my video, right? If I had my computer just up and I'm out and about and I'm doing something embarrassing and I forgot to turn my camera off after this, you all have access to watch me do something embarrassing. Also acknowledging what that camera access is, what applications have access to my camera, right? A lot of times, Instagram, Facebook, those sorts of things will automatically have access. And so if there is that spyware, that malware, does it allow someone to turn my camera on when I don't know that it's on? Similarly, considering audio devices, what apps have access to record or not record? Is it something that I have heard from victims or heard stories that if my phone's out, right, it's automatically recording? Similar to things along the lines of an Alexa, I almost call it an Alexa, or those Google Homes that if I say something, hey Alexa, and it automatically comes on, it's automatically recording what I'm saying or what I'm doing potentially. This is the same for computers. That should say tablets, gaming devices, stored personal information, and just keeping in mind that devices can be monitored. Email safety tips. If it's safe, create a new email account that abusive person is unaware of. And this is where maybe you can communicate with your advocate, with your therapist. If you're not comfortable creating that second email, being mindful that you're deleting old emails, not only from your inbox, but deleting old emails from the trash folder as well. If it's something that you have those two accounts and you need to forward to your new email, making sure that you're deleting that sent email in that box as well. Talking with friends and family, using strong passwords. Also consider something like our chat feature or our contact us page, using those contact us pages rather than email so that it's not coming from your email. When we're browsing the internet, right, we're in a YouTube hole and we're going down the trail or whatever it is, making sure that we're using safe and secure private browsing if possible. And this isn't really as much of an option now with libraries being closed, but using public computers. If it's possible, using that incognito window, right? Deleting history, deleting some or all history. We want to be mindful that if I'm looking up something today and my abuser goes to look and all of my history is deleted, they may be suspicious. But if I'm able to just kind of go through and delete a couple pages, then they're not going to be as suspicious, right? Opt out of databases, opt out of certain surveys or things when possible. If possible, we're seeing, I think all of us a lot more when we go to a certain website, that little thing at the bottom is popping up that says, this website uses cookies or whatever it is, declining when you can, so that it's one less way for folks or things to be able to be tracked. Keeping in mind those impersonation and spoofing apps, right? I think a lot of us have probably gotten phone calls from a random number, and those are oftentimes a spam calls or from a spoofing app that it's a masked number. Or some of us have probably had experiences where someone used our number to call someone else. So if we can, using two-step verification for certain accounts, looking through Facebook, other apps on names similar to you to see if someone else is creating that fake account in your name. Being mindful to change and update our security questions, right? Those are the easy, where did you go to high school? If someone knows us and they know where I went to high school, they know my mother's maiden name, they know my father's middle name, right? with those security questions, they can gain access to my accounts. So being mindful to maybe change up the spelling of the name, right? Something that I can still guess, but knowing to limit, again, that access. Some more general kind of safety tips. Update passwords often when possible. Consider adding family controls to certain login features or devices. Changing email addresses associated with apps. Resetting devices when possible. If I think that someone has had access to my phone, resetting that device so that it's going to be starting fresh, right? And maybe you have a game on your phone that you're on level 1000. You're going to have to start that game over, right? But knowing that my safety is much more important than beating level 22. If it's possible, using fake or alternative names, right? Again, Megan, pretty popular name, but if I'm someone with a more unique name or something, I might want to consider just calling myself Megan or M or Meg, right? So that way someone maybe doesn't know what it is that I'm using or not using. It's also so incredibly vile. What am I trying to say? It's really, really important right now for us to also keep in mind vitally. That's what I was trying to say. Emotional safety planning. Self-care, self-care, self-care. Does this look like going for a walk? Does this look like opening your windows, right? I opened my window the other day and my mood immediately lifted, right? Can I craft? Can I color? I've colored a couple times. But also making sure that we're talking to folks about staying connected to online church services, online therapy, online certain groups. I know there's a lot of, I've seen if someone's involved in AA, there are groups out there that are doing AA and certain things online. So making sure that we're doing those things. Maybe it looks like encouraging them to do a 5-minute yoga session online or dancing around, right? Making sure that we're not forgetting in that physical safety in this kind of uncertainty, that we're not forgetting to take care of ourselves. And so we've got about 10 minutes left. That's a lot of information. Folks have asked, so we're not going to send out the PowerPoint, but there will be handouts that we have created, and we're also going to send out some other kind of more national/local resources specifically about this. So, song characters, that is a great name. Oh, I'm going to steal that too, for certain accounts and for certain things. Yeah. So with this timeless, I would love to know if you all have questions, other things or concerns that have come up, right? We really want you all to know that we are a resource. Like I said earlier, our advocates are available. Our helpline is available, our shelter. So, yeah. Folks are giving certain tips, and I want to say thank you for those of you who have given tips. Some of the tips that you all have given that I think are really great are using Cash App as a means to money, really keeping in mind, and we could spend a really long time on, this is a very general overview, but we really need to keep in consideration that the barriers are even higher for more vulnerable populations, right? Undocumented folks who maybe don't have access to money, to food in the same way other folks do. The safety feature on your phone. Oh, I'm going to look into that. Okay, so if your phone has a safety feature, looking into that as well. Using song character names. Spyware, where can we find more information about spyware and tracking devices? So one of the links we're going to send is through the National Network, and they have an entire website dedicated to safety. It's tech safety, so we will send that along to you. They've got tons of information about safety planning on computers, on devices, so we will be sure to get that. De-escalation strategies, do you have any handouts? Not that I can think of, but I will look into that. Yep, I heard in Europe they're using code words in pharmacies. We do not have anything like that. I think that what I would talk with folks is maybe talking with them for now and for later, to therapists, to doctors, about, hey, if I use this word, a lot of it, again, is going to be with that victim's comfort level of what they feel comfortable sharing or not sharing. One thing I tell folks to do often is, if you're going to tell your friend or your family member something, or let's use an example, coworkers, right? I'm just going to tell my coworker that my partner and I broke up. I don't have to tell everybody else that we broke up because they were abusive. But what I can say is, hey, listen, my partner and I broke up. If you see them around, can you let me know? Because I do not want to deal with it. Keeping it kind of that generic, with what they feel comfortable. Yes, I will send those tips out to folks. Oh man, Mary Lou, that's a really good question. She says, tell me more about how abusers are masterful at looking at their abusers as reasonable, justified, and rational. So I could talk about this for hours, but so I always use the example of, think about when we hear about a famous person, a celebrity who has assaulted someone or who is an abusive person. Kind of, I think a community reaction is to say, that I would never, I cannot believe that person would do that. And we have this reaction, and we don't even know this person, right? They're a great musician, they're a great artist, they're a great actor, and we still kind of have that initial reaction that they would never, this person would never. And so too, a lot of abusers are really good at kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And so I said earlier, it's a choice, right? Abusers are making a choice to abuse this person that they're mad at or that they are supposed to care about. They're not yelling at their boss. They're not yelling at their coworker. They're not yelling at that guy down the street. They're waiting until they get home. And so maybe this looks like, my partner and I are going to get in a fight. And when this all clears out and we're going to go have a barbecue with friends because everyone wants to get out of the house, my partner just yelled at me, right? And I'm kind of a mess. And I go, and everyone's going to see me looking sad, kind of reserved. And this partner, my partner, is going to say, can you believe Megan? She's, acting crazy again. She's doing all this stuff. And they're going to look like the person that is in the clear. I also think about when police respond and a perpetrator or an abuser is very calm, collected. Yes, officer. Yes, officer. And a victim is going to be reacting, right? They might be crying. They might be more hysterical. And so again, that perception could be that the victim is the crazy one, while the perpetrator or the abuser is very calm and collected. And so I think that that's something really to keep in mind. Or if it's someone that, she was talking to this person that she wasn't supposed to be talking to, that's why I hit her, right? She cheated, so that's why I had to abuse her. I needed to let her know that she can't do these things. And then victims internalize that, like, oh yeah, I was supposed to have had dinner ready. I was supposed to have not talked to that person. And so this person feels, again, taking that blame on. As an advocate, how can I make the safety plan for long and short term? So it can be, did you mean the same plan? Yes and no. So I kind of, in my brain, anytime I'm talking to a victim, anytime I'm talking to a client, I am safety planning. It could be, how are you taking care of yourself afternoon? That can be a safety plan. It's really important that we can make all of the plans in the world, and we can walk through step 1, step 2, and step 3, and they might not work. And so it's really going to depend on that person, and also how much time we have. If someone's calling me from their bathroom, that safety plan needs to be real short and concise, because if they're in the bathroom for a real long time, an abuser is going to start to be suspicious. But if their abuser is out grocery shopping and we have more time, we might be able to get a little bit more detailed in that safety plan. Does that make sense? Do you have advice on how to? Do you have any advice on how to give a victim a code word or some way to let them know they are not safe if you are not sure if the abuser is listening or reading the text? Oh man, that's a tough one. I would say that you're going to have to rely on the victim to let you know if that person is listening. I think in-person conversations probably are better than not, or over the phone would, in my brain, be a little bit better than maybe a video. A video might be able to be more easily recorded. Right. And then, knowing that if you're trying to come up with that code word in that moment and you're not sure someone's listening, maybe changing it up, right? Maybe saying, okay, this is what we're going to use for now. If in the future we need to change it, we can. And I think really, really important to keep in mind when we're safety planning is a safety plan isn't concrete. I think a lot of times we think of old-fashioned, get out, a bunch of pieces of paper, but really a safety plan is meant to be kind of a living document, if you will. It's meant to be change with the day, change. It could look different from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday. So I want to make sure. Yeah, and I would say too that it's really, really important that we're relying and leaning on victims and on our clients to lead that conversation and to let them know the safest way to contact them. If a victim calls me and leaves me a voicemail, I may not call back if I don't know it's safe, right? That's one thing we tell our folks is, I'm not going to leave you a voicemail if I don't know it's safe. So making sure that they're leading that conversation about what safety is and is not. Hi, Megan, can you create a website to reach our young folks? Oh my gosh, I wish I could. For young people, I'm going to refer you to two things, and I will make sure to include those. Let me write myself a note. Break the Cycle and Love is Respect have a ton of information that is specific to young people who are experiencing dating violence. And so I would say they've got quizzes, they've got handouts. They're really where I rely on a lot of to get a lot of my resources and a lot of my information from. All right. Are there any other questions? You all also have my email. I will be sending out, hopefully within the next little bit, definitely within the hour, information with our handout with those things. And then you all have my information and our helpline information to reach out to. We're always available. Yeah. So I want to say thank you to everyone for attending our first webinar. I think it went all right. If you have feedback, please email me. I'm always open to suggestions. And keep an eye out on, like I said, our information on our newsletter, on our social media, and those sorts of things. All right, if you would like a certificate for this, I am happy to send out a certificate. We're not doing CEUs, but I'm happy to send out a certificate to folks. Just reply to my email and we'll make sure to get that to you. Thank you, everyone. This is great. Thank you. I enjoyed this. So thanks so much.